Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I feel like I've been up for hours, and I apologize for being late. It actually took me an hour to get here from the Northeast San Fernando Valley on surface streets. It was absolutely ridiculous. But I've been up since 5 in the morning, making breakfast and getting a little cardio in, packing my daughter's lunch and getting her to school. So I apologize for being late, but that's sort of the way things are these days. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, Kiki. Let's give her a big round of applause. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And it's a pleasure to be here. You know, a year ago, my election made headlines for several reasons. The first reason was because if you followed my election to the LA City Council, I was 19 points down in the primary. And I was elected on a special election because my predecessor had left early to run for Congress and was already a Congress member by the time they called my election special. So I actually was not on the same calendar as our regular election last year. So that's why people get a little confused. But I was 19 points down in the primary, and I had to regroup really quickly to figure out how I was going to be able to beat the odds. There was a lot of people who said to me, there is no way you can come back from a 19-point deficit. That's impossible. You can't do that. Well, I come from a family who are doers, and we get things done. And my mother said to me, you know, there's something called hard work, and you need to be able to do that. And, you know, if it's one thing I taught you, is that, you know, you don't give up on yourself, and you try to sort of regroup and really figure out who your friends are. And last year we did that. We ran a very successful runoff campaign because me and a group of friends basically said to ourselves, the only way we're going to be able to come back from a 19-point deficit is to walk every single day and talk to voters. It's a brand new election. It's a runoff. There's only 2 people in it, and that's what we need to do. We raised very little money because, quite honestly, even the political insiders at City Hall said, why would we give you $700, because that's a maximum you can contribute, if you're not going to win? And so I didn't take offense to that, but there are friends of mine who gave me $50, $100, $250, and maybe 3 people who gave me $700. And with that, we were able to mount a reasonable campaign. But the secret to our success is the fact that we didn't give up, and the fact that we walked every single day for 2.5 months in 110-degree weather. You think this week was hot? You should have seen what it was like last year when we were walking precincts in the San Fernando Valley and humidity. I've been in office now for almost 12 years. I started in a really small town, independent city here in the city of, in the San Fernando Valley, the city of San Fernando. I ran for the first time in 2003. I wasn't supposed to win then, and I was able to win. I came in, there was 3 open seats, and I won the 3rd one just barely by almost 100 votes. And I wasn't supposed to win that election. I served on the San Fernando City Council for 6 years. 3 of those, I was the mayor of the city of San Fernando. And when I was pregnant in 2009, someone said to me, you should probably think about running for school district. And at the time, I was 7 months pregnant, and I said, well, first of all, I'm not a teacher, I'm not an administrator. I don't have the sort of education background to be able to run for that seat. But something told me, well, first of all, I am a product of LAUSD, a very proud product of LAUSD. And 2 things happened to me that were very, very special when I was growing up. I had teachers who really took an interest in me, knew everything about me and what kind of a learner I was. And my mother and father really instilled in us, really early on, that the only thing that was going to get us to become very successful in this country was education. So I had the foundation at home, but I knew that along the way in my LAUSD experience, some things didn't go as well for my classmates. So I said to myself, I'm about to become a mom for the very first time, and I'm going to do this. I ran, wasn't supposed to win then either. I ran against a teacher. I only won by 650 votes. On election night, I actually went home thinking I had lost. But you know how I told you I was pregnant? My daughter was born 2 weeks before my election day for LAUSD school board. And the fact that, you know, I had just had a baby, I thought I had lost. And then I went through something called, you know, postpartum depression after I had my daughter, and I won a seat on the 2nd largest school district in the country. Was a little daunting for me, just a little. And it just so happens that over the last 4 years that I served on the school district, we had this thing called, you know, the financial crisis in the state. And this district cut almost $2 billion worth of services. So it was a very, very tough time to serve on the school board, let alone think about running for re-election, let alone think about running for a different office, because after cutting $2 billion worth of services, a lot of people were angry at me. A lot of people were angry at me, and we had to make really tough choices. And something very, very tragic happened during that time. We began to uncover all this sexual molestation. And I began to think to myself, who do I know in Sacramento that can help me push legislation that would give me the authority to dismiss any adult in the school district that touches children, hits kids, or introduces drugs to children? I appreciate the applause, but back when we were trying to push for this legislation 2 years ago, we couldn't find one courageous person in Sacramento to stand with us. And the bill was defeated in the Education Assembly Committee, but by 1 vote. And I said to myself, well, this is very tragic. We can't really evaluate folks based on what they teach, and we can't even protect them in the classroom, in terms of making sure that they're safe. And so I said to myself, there's a lot of things that need to change in the district, but there's also something that I need to continue to do. And at the same time, my predecessor, now Congressmember Tony Cardenas, said to me, I'm going to run for Congress, and there's going to be a vacancy on the city council. And I said to myself, there is no way that after making these devastating cuts at the district, and as dysfunctional as sometimes the district might appear, that anybody would vote for me for the city council. And I went to my mom, and I said, what do you think? And she said, hard work will always get you there. Is this something you want to do? And I said, Mom, I remember that when we were growing up, the one thing my parents instilled in my sister and I is a love of community, and I grew up in Pacoima. If those of you who are familiar with this community, there's a lot of things that have changed over the past 40 years, but it's always been an underserved community. And one of the things that got us involved in politics was the fact that my mom and dad always thought we needed to give back. My mom was a factory worker who never spoke English. My dad was a dishwasher who never drove in his life, who would take the bus from Pacoima at 5 in the morning, 6 days out of the week, to get to work in Sherman Oaks. That's my mom and dad. My mother is my biggest mentor, my biggest supporter, and the woman that I credit for my love of my community and trying to give back. So I went to her and I said, I have always dreamed about serving in office, and I think I've accomplished that. But one of my biggest dreams is to serve on the second largest city in the country. And having grown up in this community and done a lot of things around education and environmental justice, I want to be able to serve this community on the second largest city in the country. And she says, well, you need to do that. And my political involvement comes out of necessity. It doesn't come out of thinking that this is a glamorous life. This is a lot of work. And for women in particular, there's a lot that goes into factoring whether you want to run for office or not, let alone get elected. But the necessity out of my father being a dishwasher for 30 years at a restaurant, my mom was a factory worker in a company that was across the street from where we grew up, who left in the 1980s to Mexico and laid off almost 1,800 people. So my love for community and organizing comes out of necessity. I was the interpreter in my house. I had to figure out quickly how we were going to try to save my mother's job, because back in the 80s and the early 90s, Price Pfister used to pay $14, $15 an hour. That's almost unheard of. We used to build things in the San Fernando Valley. We used to build faucets, and we used to have the carnation plant, the dairy farms here in Panorama City, the cars that General Motors used to build in Van Nuys. That is all gone. That is the reason why families in the San Fernando Valley moved and lived here. Well, out of necessity, I had to quickly figure out how I was going to get politically involved and help my mother save her job. The struggle took 3 years. I was in high school. I didn't know what really politics was like. My mother lost her job as a result, and the Northeast San Fernando Valley never recovered from that loss of manufacturing jobs. So that's where that comes from. And so now that I sit on the LA City Council, being the only woman in a city with 4 million people, and 52% of the population are women, I'm the only woman out of 18 positions. If you count the 15 council members that I sit with, and the mayor, the city controller, and the city attorney's office, those are 18 city positions, and we're down to 1 woman. And there's a couple of things that I believe have a lot to do with that. We do question ourselves. There is no doubt. There is no doubt that I question myself every time I want to run for a different office, whether I have the intelligence, the intellect, the whereabouts about how to deal with those policy issues, there is no doubt. But I've never met a man who actually doubted himself whether he can do the job well or not. And so we need to do something about creating a pipeline for women to actually see elected office as a career for them. It is a wonderful career. It's a career that is incredibly, takes you a lot away from home a lot. And I've come under a lot of scrutiny, especially when I was running for office when I was pregnant, when women used to tell me, shouldn't you stay home and raise your child, in interviews for endorsement meetings? And I would say, well, how many male candidates have you asked that question of, if we're going to level the playing field? And so when you run for office, you need to take a lot of, I think women just, it's a different stereotype. First of all, who are our partners going to support the fact that we're probably not going to be home as much? Are our children going to pay the consequences for you sometimes missing a couple of activities at school and not being there after school necessarily? And what is that going to mean for your family? And, you know, the last thing is the emotional support that you need to be able to run for office. Women make exceptional candidates. When we debate an issue and we're there at the table with men, the gender balance that needs to be taken into consideration when you are debating any issue is very, very important. Not only for women's issues, but for our daughters, to be able to see role models in us, that this is a career worth fighting for and worth wanting to aspire when they're little and when they grow up. One of the things that I think is missing in women in office is that we're not creating the pipeline. When there is a vacancy anywhere in the city or in the state for the assembly, for the state senate, for city council, sometimes there's already a man that they're grooming for, you know, a couple of years before they actually run. We need to do the same thing. We need to identify the seats that are going to be open, and now with term limits in Sacramento, it's going to take us a little longer. But we know what those seats are. We need to be ready to be able to nominate women that are able to run for these seats. Women are running businesses. We're taking on issues like education and healthcare. We're running nonprofits. Women are already at the helm of some of these important issues that are being debated in the city. There is no reason why a woman who's already doing all these things and leading can't run for office in the city. We have to do more. We have to do it faster, because the fact that I'm the only woman in the second largest city in the country is honestly quite embarrassing. And we need to do more. We have an opportunity next year to elect more women, but we need to financially support them. We need to encourage them. We need to not only support them financially, we need to walk and spread the message of what our campaign's about, and then we need the emotional support that it takes to actually do this work. You know, sometimes I go home and I think to myself, you know, is dinner ready? Have I done enough to keep the house nice and tidy? And the reality is that my life is chaos every single day. And I've learned to accept that. And I'm okay with the fact that it's a little chaotic, and maybe it's not as tidy as I would like it to, but this is a passion of mine. And my daughter gets to say that her mom is a city councilwoman in the second largest city in the country, and my daughter will also get to say one day that there is a woman president in the White House. Thank you so much for allowing me to share my experience with you.